Candymonium, the newest roller coaster at Hersheypark. I have heard a lot of mixed opinions on the ride. Some people were wondering if it was a good fit for Hersheypark, considering that they already have Sky Rush, which is another hyper coaster. So how is Candymonium? Is it worth the wait, and is it good for the park? This is my review of Candymonium at Hersheypark. Candymonium is in the new Chocolate Town section of the park, and before we get into the ride experience, I want to point out how fantastic this ride looks. You walk into the park into this wide open entrance plaza and see this massive Hershey Kiss shaped fountain. Wrapping around this fountain is Candymonium, which looks like a monster in this section. The ride sits down in kind of a valley and it towers over the park. When you walk into the queue house, the first thing you see is this massive sign. The sign has a ton of Hershey's candies on the front, including Reese's and Twizzlers. You walk into the multicolored queue house. Each color represents a different candy. Blue represents Hershey Kisses, orange represents Reese's, and red is Twizzlers. Also, there are signs in the queue that have candy logos plastered all over them. Other than that, there is no theming in the queue. It's just a bunch of switchbacks. You walk up into the station, and I don't know if it's just the day we went, but this ride breaks down a lot. Probably because it's new, but there were a lot of mechanical errors during our visit. Please comment down below and let me know if this is always the case. When you get into the station, you pick one of 7 different rows. Now this is interesting, as most rides of this type, for example Orion or Nitro, there are 8 rows. It might be because of the smaller size, but it's still a bit different. In my opinion, this ride is definitely a back row ride. In the front row, you feel the wind, but in the back row, you get the amazing pull over all of the hills and turns. Riders load into one of the 3 candy trains, which I think is nice theming, and start climbing up the 210-foot tall lift hill. Now, this is pretty small for a hyper, as I know Diamondback is 230 feet, and so is Intimidator. But even for this height difference, it is barely noticeable when on the ride. As you climb up the lift hill, you can look down onto the Chocolate Town section of the park. Unfortunately, it's hard to see the rest of the park because of the way the ride faces, but you can still see the freshly painted twisty track. Before we get into the drop, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the like button for more great content on my channel. As you start going down the drop, you get airtime the entire way down. This drop ends pretty quickly in my opinion, but you still get some amazing floater airtime. This element leads into a smooth valley where you are going 76 miles per hour. This valley has some good positive G's before you head up into a massive Camelback Hill, providing some of the best floater airtime I've experienced. The ride dips down into a pretty intense turnaround. This element really surprised me because most B&Ms don't have intense elements, especially for hypers. But this turn has some great positive G's in it. I think it's because you start the turn pretty low to the ground and twist upwards, while Intimidator and Diamondback start higher up. Also, it feels like that the elements on this coaster are lower overall than the other hypers because you really fly through all of the elements. Following this amazing turnaround element is another Camelback Hill, because this is a B&M hyper after all. All of them at least have 3 Camelback Hills. This Camelback is the weakest on the ride due to a trim break at the start of the hill, but the hill still provides some excellent floater airtime. Now this is where we enter the second half of the ride. The second half of the ride is not like the other B&M hypers at all. While other B&M hypers usually have more Camelbacks in the second half, this ride doesn't. This ride has more twists and turns than airtime in the second half. The first element in the second half is a speed hill, and wow, this element is awesome. This is very similar to Orion's speed hill. And while Orion's is faster, Candymonium's isn't as tall. Orion's speed hill is more floater airtime, while Candymonium's is flowjector. This element is one of my favorites on the ride, and it provides the best airtime on the coaster. But this isn't the best element on the coaster. Following this airtime hill is a helix. This helix is pretty low to the ground, and is surprisingly intense for a B&M. Diamondback's and Intimidator's helix are very lame compared to this. Those helixes provide no force whatsoever, while this one has some great positive G's. Now this next element is the best part of the coaster. This wacky outer bank is one of the most insane elements on any coaster. You take a rapid twist to the side, get ejected out of your seat, and get very, very close to touching a support from the drop. This is one of the best head choppers anywhere, and the fact that you are out of your seat makes this support feel even closer. This element also has sideways airtime, very similar to Lightning Rod's first element. I think this is what Orion was attempting to do, but Candymonium's wave turn is way better than Orion's. Following this is another airtime hill that sadly has a trim, but I barely noticed the trim while on the coaster. This has great airtime as well. Now you dip down into one final turn around the Hershey Kiss fountain. You don't really notice the fountain on the ride, but it's a very intense turn to end the coaster. This ride is epic, not only because of the elements, but because of the setting. This ride is just so nice to watch. It is also my favorite B&M Hyper, as it has better airtime and twists than Diamondback and Intimidator. I like this coaster more than Orion as well. Now I do think that this is great for the park. Skyrush is more of a ride for the enthusiast, because it's very intense and extremely whippy. Candymonium is meant for the average guest that can't handle extreme forces. The GP like graceful floater-filled coasters. That is what Candymonium is meant for. This is my second favorite ride in the park, and overall I think Candymonium is one of the best rides in the world. It is definitely worth the wait. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I will see you guys next time.